so nice to be here today. Thank you all for joining us here today, and especially to our speakers, who I will introduce momentarily. Today, we gather to honor those who have fought the good fight before us, who were there at Stonewall 50 years ago, and who otherwise laid the groundwork for the progress that has been made since then. Our country clearly has made some enormous strides since Stonewall, in part because of the tireless activists who have been working and fighting for half a century or more. Who honestly could have predicted that 50 years, even 20 years ago, that a movement like marriage equality could have become a reality nationwide? And yet, in 2019, those who identify as transgender, lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, asexual, non-binary, or other sexual orientations or gender expressions still experience violence and discrimination because of who they are, who they love, and how they express themselves. In 2019 so far, at the very least, 10 Black trans women have been murdered. That number of victims is probably higher due to vast underreporting of these crimes. And I'd just like to take a moment to remember their names. Dana Martin, Jazeline Ware, Ashanti Cameron, Claire Legato, Malaysia Booker, Tamika Washington, Paris Cameron, Shinal Lindsay, Chanel Sherlock, Laylene Polanco, and Zoe Spears. And of course, we have a long road ahead of us in the fight for so many other communities as well. In 2019, immigrant children as young as 4 months old have been ripped from their parents and locked in cages by our own federal government. In 2019, synagogues and mosques and churches across the world have been targeted by violence because of how their congregants pray. In 2019, racist housing and criminal justice policies that are now only slowly being dismantled are keeping our non-white neighbors from reaching their true, deserving potential. And in 2019, the Me Too movement is evidence that even white, straight, cisgendered, able-bodied women like me must continue to fight for our rights. 50 years after the Stonewall Riots, the struggle for peace, justice, and equity continues. Stonewall is still many people's reality. Please know that if this is you, I see you, and I believe you, and I believe in you. Today we give voice to all marginalized communities, and we reaffirm that this fight must be intersectional. Progress simply will not happen if we remain in our silos and commit only to our causes. We must be champions for ourselves and for each other because our destinies are hitched to one another, whether we realize it or not. I am so pleased to be joined by this illustrious group of speakers who will come one right after the other. Pittsburgh City Councilman Bruce Kraus, Council President Bruce Kraus, excuse me, Megan Stanley, Interim Director, City of Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations, Maria Montano, transgender and labor rights activist, Aaliyah Chandler, Board Chair of the Pittsburgh Equality Center, Dr. Sarah Hansen, Treasurer of the City of Pittsburgh Gender Equity Commission, Olivia Tucker, Program Coordinator, Road of Shalom Congregation, Kathy Boyle, Senior Specialist of Prasad Center, Monica Ruiz, Executive Director of Casa San Jose, and Wasim Mohammed, former Executive Director of the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh. I also want to note the many attendees, and my apologies if I missed someone or a represented group today, but we have commissioners and staff from the Commission on Human Relations, commissioners and staff from the Gender Equity Commission, both for the City of Pittsburgh, members of the Mayor's LGBTQIA+ Advisory Council, Mayor Peduto's office, the Steel City Stonewall Democrats, Pennsylvania Youth Congress, Real Q, the Pittsburgh Lesbian and Gay Film Festival, Project Silk, Women's Law Project, Prasad Center, Pittsburgh Equality Center, PFLAG, Representative Dan Frankel's office, and CDOC. So with that, I am very happy to introduce City Council President Bruce Kraus.
good morning, everyone. I find it difficult to believe that it has been 50 years. In 1969, I was 15 years old, but the story of Stonewall reached me and affected my life. And 3 years later, in 1972, I came out, and I've had the privilege of living as an openly gay man for the last 47 years. In that time, we have made great strides. There's no question about that. And yet, so much remains to be done. The community, our community, as it existed in 1972, is not the community that exists in 2019. And back then when I came out, my idea of what it was to be a gay man is completely different than what it is to be a gay man within the context of our community as it exists today. We are as broad a swath of people as you will find anywhere. And so the changes that are going to be introduced today in City Council are intended to have our city code reflect and represent and protect our community as it exists today. But please keep in mind that those protections that the city has put in place since 1989 end at our city limits. And that once we leave Pittsburgh, there are no protections and there are no guarantees as far as the state of Pennsylvania is concerned or the federal government is concerned. And so I don't want us to delude ourselves that somehow our work is accomplished. We have made great strides. I am as proud of the city of Pittsburgh as I could possibly be for our stand on equality, but have to continue to advocate for the change that needs to take place both in state and federal protection. And then in closing, welcome. Mr. Mayor, welcome. Please come up, join us. Please. So in closing, I don't want to leave you with just the story of Stonewall, which is commonly believed to be the birth of the modern gay rights movement, but I want to remind everyone of the importance of transgendered people, especially transgender women of color, who in 1966, on a hot August night, led the charge at Gene Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco that led to transgendered women of color taking the mantle and leading the riot at Stonewall. And yet today in 2019, one of our most persecuted members of our community remains to be transgendered women of color. And that is as unacceptable as anything that I can possibly think of. So with that, I thank you for being here. I want to thank my colleague, Councilwoman Strassburger, for sharing this with me, and all of our invited speakers, and of course for you attending this incredibly important moment. Shall you? Yes. Great. Thank you very much.
So as Council President Kraus mentioned, this year also marks the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Pittsburgh Human Relations Ordinance number 395, banning sex discrimination, which is an ordinance that made Pittsburgh's anti-discrimination laws the strongest in the country. And so today I am proud to stand with my colleague, Council President Kraus, the Commission on Human Relations, and the Gender Equity Commission to announce the introduction of legislation that you heard about to strengthen protections against discrimination for LGBTQIA+ residents, employees, and visitors of Pittsburgh. This legislation replaces outdated definitions of protected classes such as sexual orientation and sex with more inclusive definitions, adds new definitions for gender identity and gender expression, which previously did not even have definitions in the code, and replaces gendered language with gender-inclusive language to further ensure our LGBTQIA+ neighbors have recourse in the face of discrimination. No one in Pittsburgh should live in a life of fear at work, when searching for a home, or when visiting a business or public place based on who they are, who they love, and how they express themselves. Something, as mentioned, that many Pennsylvanians outside of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia largely face. I do want to give credit for Representative Dan Frankel, who has introduced legislation year after year at the state legislature to try to rectify this at the state level. So to speak a little bit more about this legislation, I'm happy to introduce Megan Stanley from the Commission on Human Relations.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today to stand in solidarity with the LGBTQIA+ community in remembrance of the Stonewall Riots. My name is Megan Stanley. I'm the Interim Director of the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. As you heard, we are also here today to introduce stronger protections against discrimination in Pittsburgh for gender identity, gender expression, sex, and sexual orientation. While some of these terms were not clearly defined in legislation previously, others included outdated terms that did not reflect the inclusivity we strive for in the city of Pittsburgh. The Commission on Human Relations is tasked with enforcing anti-discrimination laws, and we are proud that the city has many localized protections that are not offered at the state or federal level, or as you heard, even in outlying counties, especially regarding gender identity and gender expression. The purpose of amending city code in this way is to help every Pittsburgher understand their rights and to feel protected, and to help employers, housing providers, and service providers understand their responsibilities under the law. While the Commission was previously able to take complaints of gender identity and gender expression discrimination in employment, we are expanding these protections today to include housing and public accommodations as well. We believe that no one, regardless of how they identify or express themselves or who they love, should be unfairly denied the basic right of housing or enjoyment of public accommodations. This is an important step because we have heard from residents who call our office and they've been told things like they need to prove their gender, they need documentation of their gender, or that this wasn't the right place for people like them. These comments are not okay, and they can quickly lead to discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. Our ability to enforce these protections, though, rests with all of you. We can only fight against discrimination when we are made aware of it. If you or anyone you know has been treated unfairly in the city of Pittsburgh based on their membership in a protected class, please call our office, visit us right here on the 9th floor, or go to our website or social media. Together, we can end discrimination in Pittsburgh and work towards a more equitable future. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Councilwoman Strassburger, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Maria Montana, and I am a proud transgender woman. 50 years ago, the LGBTQ community, led by trans women of color, stood up and demanded to be seen as human beings, worthy of dignity and respect. While we have made some progress, we are currently facing the greatest threats to our civil rights in my lifetime. 50 years ago, we would be forced to expose our genitals to police raiding queer spaces. We would be beaten and stripped of our humanity. And today, we face a federal government that wants to erase us from existence and is doing everything in its power to deny us our civil rights. And now they want us to submit to genetic screening in the 21st century version of a bathroom strip search if we attempt to use existing civil rights laws to protect ourselves from discrimination. Being an outspoken public member of a marginalized community means having a constant worry about your life and your wellness. Every day I get up and face a world that is filled with people attempting to dehumanize me. They call me a predator. They call me a rapist. They pass laws that take away my rights and criminalize my ability to live a public life. People proudly state that they would shoot me or cause me physical harm because they are led to believe that I am a threat to their life or their children. They are told by elected officials, religious leaders, and others that I am someone to be feared, I am othered, and told I don't belong and that I'm sick. It means that when I speak out publicly about my truth that I receive rape and death threats. It means that we wake up to discover that our names and pictures are being shared on white supremacist message boards with people mocking our existence, doxing us, dead-naming us, calling our workplaces, and spreading fear to our friends and our families. It means every day living in a state of fear and worry, and it means wondering if the next time we gather with our community to celebrate our joys or to mourn a loss, that you will be the next victim of hate. These are things that I expect to happen after sharing my story today, and it weighed heavily on my mind before joining you. It is why when I am asked to speak out and fight for my humanity that I need a community behind me using their voices to protect me. There is only safety through solidarity, and I urge you to speak out against transphobic hate speech when you see it. That's why it is critically important that our elected leaders fight alongside us for our right to exist and that they work with us to ensure that our voices are heard in every arena. This year, more than any other in recent memory, Pride needs to be about more than a party. It needs to be a renewed commitment to continue to fight for our liberation. Because our liberation will not come from an organization that sells our history to a corporation that gives money to politicians that want to erase us while poisoning the air that we breathe. Our liberation will not come from marching side by side with corporations that violate workers' rights, that pay poverty wages, and do harm to our community. Our liberation will not come if we stand silent in the face of the human injustice of concentration camps on our southern border. Our liberation will only come by standing together as one community and demanding collective liberation for all of us. Thank you.
It is hard to believe that the Stonewall Riots occurred 50 years ago. Okay, sorry about that. It is hard to believe that the Stonewall Riots occurred 50 years ago. What started as a small rumble of voices crying out for change turned into a mighty roar on June 28. We have come so far, and yet we have so much more to do. An inspirational quote comes to mind when I think and reflect on the gravity of the riots. Marie Robinson once said, "Nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending." That's why the proposed legislation warms my heart, to know that our region is geared towards being inclusive and will provide protections for all who reside in our community. The Pittsburgh Equality Center and myself as chair, we share in this mission. We want at the center to strive to make all members of the LGBT+ community be more familiar with one another, and we accept you, whomever you are, regardless of your race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation. At the PEC, we want you to find your tribe and thrive. I hope that if you are in the neighborhood, that you'll stop by and visit us on Ellsworth Avenue. Thank you, and here's to being the change that we want to see in the world.
I am the treasurer for the City of Pittsburgh's Gender Equity Commission,
and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I use she and they interchangeably because while I accept my body, my sex as woman, I have never really felt particularly female, nor have I strongly identified as male. I'm somewhere in between. I'm genderqueer. Lacking the language to describe how I feel and think to others has been a huge part of my struggle with my identity. And why? Because language matters. It's an essential part of being human and daily interacting with other humans. And the language that we use every day signals to us who is included and who isn't, who matters and who doesn't. A change in language may seem simple, but it is part of achieving the future that I and my fellow commissioners and all the folks standing up here envision, in which everyone in the city of Pittsburgh, regardless of gender identity or expression, is safe in all spaces, empowered to achieve their full potential, and no longer faces barriers to economic, social, and political equality. For the people at Stonewall Inn on June 28, 1969, being of a non-binary gender and or loving someone of the same gender meant enduring violence, prison, and social derision. Today, we honor the people of the Stonewall Uprising, and I am grateful that their resistance and that of the many others who came before and followed after have led to positive social change, have in part led to Pittsburgh City Code changes that Councilperson Strassburger and Council President Kraus are introducing today. The Gender Equity Commission is proud to co-sponsor this important legislation and to continue working to build a more inclusive and equitable Pittsburgh. Thank you.
Hello, thank you everyone for being here this morning. Take a moment to breathe in something you've heard today. Take a moment to listen to the words that have been spoken. Take a moment to think about how you felt in the years that these words have grown, that we've had the ability to stand here and speak this way, and to be listened to. My name is Olivia Tucker, they, them, and I've been asked to speak on what this means to me as a transgender Jew. I want to recognize some words from Harvey Milk, one of my gay Jewish heroes and one of the first gay politicians, city supervisors, who said, "Come out, everyone to come out. Come out to the people you know, to your families, to the people you work with, because it will dispel every myth, because they will know that we are their siblings. We are their children, we are their parents, we are their coworkers, we are their neighbors." I'm here today because of my ancestors, because of my transcestors, those who have come before me, the trans women of color who stood up and said that they were done, the trans women of color who now we were able to lift up, and those who we've lost this year and so many years, who we fight for. Like Maria said, our liberation will come only through solidarity. We don't transition in a vacuum. We transition with everyone around us. Everyone around us changes with us and grows and learns and is able to be there for us because we were able to be there for ourselves. This legislation makes it possible for more people to have that protection, to be authentically them. In Judaism, it says that we can say 100 blessings a day, and maybe not have said quite enough. So I want to share a blessing from the first transgender rabbi to be ordained, Rabbi Elliot Kukla. These are blessings to say for any kind of gender transition, and I feel that this is a way to make this moment in our city's history sacred, to lift it from legislation to divine movement, to lift it to a place that will roll like the judges that struck down unconstitutional marriage laws, that snowballed until we reach the Supreme Court, that we can help this legislation get there, that we don't have to just be safe within the lines of Pittsburgh, but that every LGBTQIA and more can feel safe living in this country. if you feel called when I finish each of these 3 blessings, you can give us a nice amen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir le'ovrim. Blessed are you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of time and space, the transforming one, to those who transform and transition and cross over. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tselem Elohim. Blessed are you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of time and space, who has made me in the image of the divine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of time and space, who has kept us alive and sustained us and helped us to reach this moment. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Boyle from the Persad Center. I'm the coordinator of SAGE services, or services for the older LGBTQ community. I want to read from an opinion piece that was in the New York Times on Sunday. Early in the morning of June 28, 1969, the police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Manhattan's Greenwich Village, but this time the patrons did not go quietly. A mutiny against police harassment erupted and spread. Street rioters even set the bar on fire. Over the next 4 nights, there were demonstrations on the block. Sustained political mobilization followed. An act of resistance became a flashpoint in the struggle for LGBT dignity and equality. The fire set at Stonewall still burns. 3 years after Stonewall in 1972, the Persad Center was opened by founders Randy Forrester and Jim Huggins. For the past 47 years, Persad has worked to create safety for the LGBTQ+ community. Safety through competent mental health, drug and alcohol services, and training agencies and corporations across Pennsylvania in cultural competence. Youth, people with HIV/AIDS, the transgender community, and my seniors have also found specialized services. As a resident of Allegheny County, I know I am protected from discrimination in employment, housing, and services. But in 77% of Pennsylvania, that is not true. In 77% of Pennsylvania, that is not true. It is time for the Fairness Act to be passed in this state to assure that all PA residents have those same protections. The fire at Stonewall still burns. That fire burns at Persad as we work to serve the members of the LGBT community and hope for a time when we are all safe. Thank you.
My name is Monica Ruiz. I'm the Executive Director of Casa San Jose, and I'm very honored to be able to stand here today with my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. As we commemorate the anniversary of this important struggle to fight discrimination and advance human rights and dignity, we know that there is still much work to do. Not only to build on the achievements of the past, but to defend and protect rights that are increasingly under threat today. The past and current experiences of our immigrant brothers and sisters especially show that we have a long way to go to achieve dignity and justice for all people. The most basic lesson of history is that rights are never given to us by the powerful. They must be fought for. And once achieved, we must continue to fight for those rights. Today, we recommit ourselves to this struggle. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If one group of people is denied their rights, the rights and protections that many of us take for granted are at risk. Societies where racism and discriminatory notions of citizenship deny people's full enjoyment of their economic, social, cultural, and political rights, are deprived of the vibrancy and creativity that this diversity brings. They also lack the unity and solidarity needed to address today's urgent environmental and social challenges. In 2011, Pittsburgh became the 5th human rights city in the United States. We want this designation to be a meaningful one. We all need to play a role in helping lead the way to build a world where human rights don't end at national borders and where governments are not allowed to pick and choose which rights and which groups they're going to protect. We're here today as a part of a global human rights movement that knows that people must lead to make human rights a reality. We wanted to thank City Council for their leadership on this and remind everyone that we're here not to just celebrate this day in history, but to build our movement of solidarity, human rights, and dignity in Pittsburgh and beyond. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? A little bit higher? Shoot. Better? Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Wasim Muhammad. I'm a local Muslim activist. 50 years today was the Stonewall Riots. And I can't talk to most of it as well as everybody else who spoke today can. Their words were beautiful. The thing that I want to kind of emphasize is that commonly, especially to people who are just allies, we understand the Stonewall Riots is something that happened to spur the beginning of a movement to people pushing back. But when in reality, those populations, LGBTQIA plus brothers and sisters and siblings, those people were fighting against oppression, were fighting against injustice well before that. And they weren't just doing that for their own communities, they were doing that against injustice and oppression against any minority community. And that can be seen if you look at the characters involved and anybody in the movement, you see those people who are also active at the other social movements of the day. And that's what I think is important to remember. Because today, we have a president who will clearly just obviously make fun of people who have disabilities, that will say that entire moral groups, that entire religious groups are morally inferior, that Muslims should be banned from this country. He encourages political violence within rallies that he attends that has his name on it. He'll say that from the podium, right? All our minority communities are currently under attack. And as Lila Watson said, if we just understand that we are just helping each other in these moments, right, then we are all wasting our time. But if we understand that our liberation is bound up together as a group, you know, then let's work together and let's move forward. So that's what we need to understand. I'm proud to represent the Commission on Human Relations. I'm proud to be on the ACLU State Board of PA. I'm proud to serve on any organization that helps me fill my Islamic duty of removing any injustice from this neighborhood, from our community in Pittsburgh. Any way I can do that, I'm committed to. I'm happy and proud to stand with anybody who's willing to do that. And once again, any organization whose liberation is bound together, let's be louder than ever. Let's work harder than ever. This is the time that we have to do that. Thank you so much.
First off, I want to thank everyone who just spoke. Your words are inspiring. Sitting here on this building's portico on the 50th anniversary of an historic moment, and I wanted Bruce to be here, living through that and seeing how this city has changed. I just want to thank you for being here. For the tens of thousands of people who aren't here, that call themselves Pittsburghers, I thank you for having their voice as well. To the council members, thank you for introducing language that will strengthen the rights of Pittsburghers. You know, it is just unfounding that there is legislation sitting in Harrisburg right now that would allow people to have the rights that are given to others, that would basically say that you won't be able to lose your housing. You can't be fired for who you are. And yet our state legislature won't even bring it up for a vote. When we think about how far we came in these 50 years, we have to be reminded that our job is not only to continue that, but to make sure that we don't go backwards. And I worry about that. I want to live in a city that recognizes everyone's potential to do whatever it is that they want to be and do in life fully for who they are. I want to live in a city that recognizes individuals' individuality and praises the person for the person that they are. I don't want to live in a city that discriminates by trying to divide us, separate us, and looking at us as anything other than as Pittsburghers. And I'm thankful that we have a Commission on Human Relations, a Gender Equity Commission, leaders throughout the LGBTQIA community that are pushing for that on a daily basis. And I am extremely thankful that we have leaders in City Council that are willing to put that not only into words but into action. I've been around this building for a while. I was here when we had the debate on domestic partner benefits. The question was, for our own city workers, should we offer health care benefits that those that were in a domestic relationship, because back then you weren't allowed to get married, the same way that we offer it to those that were married. And it was hotly debated. It was not even an issue that people could come up with the ability to find common ground around. It was a very, very hotly debated issue. And that seems like yesterday. I know that today, with where we are in Pittsburgh, if that bill were to come back up, it would probably pass 7-2, 8-1, 9-0. It wasn't that way just 2 decades ago. So we find ourselves in that continual motion. We recognize today as a landmark, 50 years since the Stonewall Riots. And we recognize the progress that we've made. But we look cautiously at how much further we have to go. Thank you, council members, for the legislation you're putting forward. Thank you to the LGBTQIA Advisory Committee, to the Commission of Human Relations, and the Gender Equity Commission for representing all of Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks again to all of our speakers. Looking around today, I am just so incredibly proud of the work that everyone here does tirelessly day in and out. And I want to say that this event came about in part because of a rainbow crosswalk that was painted at the corner of Ellsworth and Maryland in the district that I represent a few years ago, and a call from the community to install a more permanent artistic feature at this historically significant site for the LGBTQIA+ community. With a request that it be done in time to mark this anniversary of Stonewall. The intersection art is in place, and there will be a beautiful unveiling this Friday evening on site planned by Richard Parsakian, Marty, Ralph, Darren, others, other long-time activists and community members. However, the artist who was chosen to design the artwork was not LGBT and was not local and won out over others who were. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to offer an unequivocal apology to the artists and others who were hurt by this, directly or otherwise. As someone who continuously and continually strives to be an ally, I have learned an important lesson through this experience, and I really look forward to sitting down with queer local artists and others so that we can work to fix this process for future city-sponsored art projects and other city-sponsored projects.
Thank you.
So with that, I thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the important work that you do. We will all continue fighting together.
you.